better be good.
Well, good evening. Let's call this meeting to order. Chair Sherman is out tonight on a well-deserved family getaway, so I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. So, Joan, roll call, please.
Director Hockert? Here. Director Kelsenberg?
Here.
Director Lauer?
Here.
Director Petrie? Here. Director Corbeni?
Okay.
Director Sealander?
Here.
And Chair Sherman is out. You have the quorum.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will make a motion to approve tonight's agenda. May I get a second, please? Director Lauer. And all those in favor to approve the agenda, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda passes. We also have a consent agenda tonight that is going to be up on the screen. So the payment of invoices from May 25th to June 7th of 2024. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Director Petrie, is there a second?
Yep.
Second.
All right, Director Kelsenberg is second. All those in favor to approve the consent agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Consent agenda passes. All right, so tonight is a study session. So we're starting off with strategic direction A, ensuring that the learning process is adaptable to meet individual student needs. So our first study session topic is QComp, annual report. And so thanks to Director Luke for joining us. And just a little background, so per Minnesota State statute, the report must be presented to the school board by June 15th of each year, include the findings and recommendations for the program. So Don, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. All right, so am I doing this, Joan?
You can, either way.
I'll have you do it because
Okay.
it's not my favorite thing. Oh, sorry. All right, so what is QComp? And again, the purpose of QComp, it is an alternative teacher professional pay system, and it is designed to help improve student learning by developing professional practices within our teaching staff. So the goal is to recruit and retain highly qualified teachers, encourage those highly qualified teachers to undertake challenging assignments that are a little bit different than just the typical classroom, and support those roles in improving the achievements of our students. And then it does provide incentives to encourage teachers to improve their knowledge and their instructional skills, all for the goal of improving student learning. There are 4 components of QComp. There are career ladder opportunities, and those are those different opportunities for teachers to become teacher leaders. There is job-embedded professional development, and TDEP, our Teacher Development Evaluation Plan, and we'll get into that later. And then performance pay after you complete all of these pieces of QComp. Component 1 is career ladder positions. So our instructional coaches, which again last year we had 12.3 FTEs of instructional coaches. Each building had its own instructional coach. Those are career ladder opportunities. We also have PLC, or professional development building leads, and again each building has that role, and there were 17 of those. We had 110 staff members that served as teacher mentors to new people coming into the district. We have 1 QComp lead, which is Deb Van Cly, and then last year we had special education site liaisons, which there were 12 assigned to that. So those are those leadership positions that are part of component 1. Yes?
Do you want questions as we go along, or do you want us to wait until the end?
Either way. I'm fine either way.
Okay. I just wanted to get a little bit more detail about the mentor You know, 110 mentors, that's great.
Yes.
And is that for just first-year teachers, or does that go on for like the first 3 years that a teacher is here? How does that work, and is it formal or informal, or how does that work?
It's more of a formal process in the sense that the mentor is assigned to a new teacher coming into our district, and they are probationary teachers, so it does go throughout that 3 years. You get probably more of that ongoing mentorship or heavy dose of mentorship that first year, but the mentor and the mentee meet once a month and go over a variety of things. And part of it, I think they have, there definitely is training for the mentors, and they have different components that they work with the teachers on. It might be, what are they doing for their goal in TDEP? They might work with them on that. It might be simple things like, how do you use the copy machine? And I don't understand what benefits I am supposed to take here. You know, things like that as well. Besides, you know, the teaching pieces of how to organize my classroom and how to, who should I go to for more support if needed, you know, encouraging them to use instructional coaches, that kind of thing. So typically they're paired and matched by someone that is, you know, subject matter related. So if I was a language arts teacher, I would have a mentor that is a language arts teacher so that we could talk content. That's important as well. But we try to match them up as closely as possible.
And does that ever get evaluated? Is it, I mean, I would assume that there are some aspects of QComp that do get evaluated. Is that one of them that gets evaluated?
I think that is part of that process. What that looks like, I'm not positive about, but I can try to look into that for you. I do think that there's a survey at the end of the year that I believe that's given to the mentee and the mentor.
Yeah, I'm
So.
sure it can be a really powerful thing, and, you know, trying to improve the program is probably a worthy goal. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Can I just ask one more question?
Yes.
Are those numbers, the number of staff, is that, how is that determined? How is that number, I mean, is it based on workload, or does the QComp program say you need to have one instructional coach per building? How do those numbers get derived?
Oh, yes. The QComp board does determine some of that once we get our budget and figuring out how you want to spend it. And so a big focus of the board in the last couple years has been instructional coaches. As you know, we have grown that program. I think last year was the first year where we had, or maybe the year before, where we had full-time coaches in all the buildings. But we were supplementing that as well from other areas. And then when we did our priority-based budgeting, we decided to pare that down just because we couldn't sustain one from each building. And what we were, you know, what was that return on investment kind of thing as we went through that process. So, but that takes up the mentor piece and obviously all of the performance pay, as well as like all of those coaches were not coming out of the QComp budget. They, you know, some of the ESSER dollars that dropped off were supplementing that program. So. Okay. Component 2 is that job-embedded professional development. So again, with that mentor partnership and collaboration, the mentor could observe in the classroom and provide feedback if needed. One of the things that has been really exciting that I've had the opportunity to observe are the learning labs. And we had 78% participation, or felt that had a positive impact on educator growth. All staff participated in learning labs, and that is an opportunity to have the instructional coach and a cohort of people come into your room, observe your classroom, and then everyone provides feedback. It's really meaningful, specific feedback. And I think when we started it last year, it was really a little bit intimidating and scary because you are opening up your classroom and having different people, your peers, come in, as well as the instructional coach. But as people started going through the process and seeing the benefits and the really positive feedback and learning from one another, it really has taken off, and people really see the value in it. It's like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to try that in my classroom. I really liked how you did that informal assessment, or I really liked what you did in the morning meeting, those kinds of things. So that's been really a positive piece. We did have formal instructional coaching cycles for all educators this year. There were 110 formal coaching cycles where, again, the teacher and the coach work together to determine what they are going to be coached on. It could be, again, revolving around their goal that they put in their teacher evaluation program, or they might, let's say the classroom environment is an area that they feel like they're struggling, and they might have someone, the coach them into that area. It depends on what of the 5D rubric pieces that they're really focusing and honing in on. So that's how they determine that. And then our collaborative action teams, which were formerly known as PLCs. And again, with the survey, 76% felt like that had the CAT inquiry cycles had a positive impact on student growth. And we did 4 inquiry cycles, formal cycles. The goal this year was to have the coaches coach into one of those. We started that, but then when we the whole process got a little bit overwhelming, and we put a pause in January to try to just slow it down and give staff some more breathing room. That piece of coaching into it from the coaches kind of fell off, and they just worked on that as their collaborative action teams.
So can I just ask a question? So, we kind of just, we expanded QComp. I think it was, 2 years ago? Is that? Or
I think so.
Maybe 2 years ago. So it sounds like Learning Labs was one of the new things that came about when we expanded that approach to improving instruction. Did we also expand on collaborative action teams and the formal instructional cycles? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
because we had a coach in all the buildings, so we could provide that formal cycle for everyone. And then the collaborative action teams, I think, got a reboot. We rebranded from PLCs. I think during COVID, most districts struggled. That was one thing that we could take off the plates is PLC meetings for teachers. And then we kind of had to regroup as we got back to normal business. And we really talked about that from a collaborative action or inquiry-based cycles. And we had some people from Solution Tree come and do some training last year. And then we were able to have our coaches and our PD leads and the CAT team leads participate in that and bring that training back to the staff. And then we also had all staff participate in that training in January last year as well. So it was kind of a process that we worked through.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
too? About the learning labs as well. How does staff determine who gets observed? Is it only the mentees who are getting observed?
No, everyone participated in those learning labs. And I'll talk about what we're going to do moving forward with a different coaching model because it will be a little bit different. But yes, everyone participated in that because part of our teacher evaluation is that a peer observation is part of that piece, and that is how we address that component.
And just a quick follow-up. With the peer observation piece, is it more focused on giving feedback to the person who is being observed, or is it like what you're learning from that person?
It's actually both. That's
Okay.
the really beautiful benefit of the learning lab versus just having a peer come in and, check the box. That's what I saw. I really saw some really rich conversations about what they learned and how, and then understanding why the teacher did something the way they did. So it was really valuable that way.
Great, sounds
Yeah.
good, thanks.
All right, component 3 is teacher development evaluation plan. And so part of our TDEP, we call that TDEP process, is the teacher has to set a goal, and they have worked with their instructional coach or their mentor to determine what that goal is, and that aligns with our 5D rubric about the different components. They need to have some sort of observation by the principal, and then there is an evaluation. There's a back and forth feedback loop with the teacher and the administrator. And they also have to do a self-assessment at the beginning and then at the end. And then they reflect at the end of the process, and then the principal does the same and provides that feedback. What we're hoping to do, some of those pieces are more intensive. Our probationary teachers have 3 of those observations throughout the year. Our tenured teachers only have 1. And I'll explain what we're going to do moving forward. But the tenured 3 teachers have a summative, a little bit more, their piece is a little more involved, where there's a summative evaluation as well. So, but every teacher goes through that process, and it goes back and forth, and then we keep track of it. Right now, we're making sure that everyone has completed it so that we can determine who met their goals and completed all the pieces so that they get their money based on that piece.
So what does that sandbox look like for these evaluations and the mentorship? I mean, is there kind of guidelines that's in place that's set by this, different mandates, or is it discretion of each principal and mentor? How does that work, just a
Nope.
big picture?
We follow the 5D rubric, and so that was decided on with the teacher bargaining unit, the SCEA, and the principals as well, and district administration. And so that is the piece that we look at, and so they are determining which of those dimensions in that 5D rubric that they want to focus in on, and then that is what the administrator is looking for or really honing in on. Not to say that, if they're focusing on instructional practices within the classroom and they notice something in the environment that might be beneficial, it doesn't mean that they can't provide feedback, but we're really trying to narrow the focus of that piece. And again, I think ideally, in an ideal world, you have some sort of conversation or written documentation about what you might be seeing going into the classroom, and then you observe and fill out, the script, and then you do your wonderings and observations, and the teacher receives that, and then they answer that piece, and then you come back, and ideally you would have a conversation, a formal meeting where you were going over that evaluation. How did you think it went? Here's what I noticed, so that you're making sure that there are, you're providing that meaningful feedback. And then, again, in the case of a non-tenured teacher, you'd hope to see something, maybe you gave them a specific thing or strategy to try for the next time, and then you would look for that moving forward. It's really about developing the teacher and providing those growth opportunities, but giving them the meaningful, actionable feedback so that they can improve their practice. Okay, so those are all components of that. Good questions. And then the last component is the performance pay based on all of those pieces. They need to meet the school-wide achievement goal, meet the student achievement goal that they set. And last year we worked to set higher goals. Those pieces of the performance pay are not the building goal is $1, and the student achievement goal is like $124. So those are not big ticket items. We want people to set the bar high so that we can move the needle. But the biggest thing is they have to complete that teacher development evaluation process and the CAT inquiry cycles and go through the formal instructional coaching cycle. And then as part of that teacher development evaluation, that learning lab was a component of it. So what are we, so our focus here for 23-24 was every educator was engaged and completed a formal coaching cycle. Every educator engaged in learning labs, and every educator participated in strengthening data inquiry processes in the collaborative action teams. So that was our focus last school year. And then moving forward, these are the surveys from some of the comments as we surveyed teachers about the different components of that. So again, I love the learning labs because it gave me the opportunity to learn from other teachers. I love the quote that says the best PD is the teacher next door, and that person agreed with that 100%. Again, I've had great opportunities to grow as a teacher, reflecting on my teacher with the instructional coach and giving specific concrete ideas to put in place in my classroom. I love the mentor program. I think the most valuable thing is when you get to spend a day planning and coordinating with your mentee. Here's about the CAT teams. I felt for the first time in many years that my CAT team was highly effective and supportive. We were able to discuss ways to support our struggling learners, and having that dedicated time made a difference in my teaching, but also with my students. And then the last one, their coaching style, expertise, and willingness to meet me where I was, hear what I wanted to work on, and then bring strategies for me to try, proved to be the most supportive experience I've had in my professional growth in the past 15 years. So the whole goal of all of this is to really support the teachers, provide them leadership opportunities, and that they're growing and learning and improving their practice so
Any
that our
opportunities
students...
for improvement? Any opportunities? This looks all like it's the best thing since
Right.
sliced bread.
Well-
So are there any opportunities for improvement that were identified?
Well, I did not conduct the survey. When I looked at it, I think, you can still get some, I think our CAT survey, or the pieces about CAT were maybe the components of the CAT process were cumbersome, like the forms. That was one of the pieces of feedback. We didn't have negative comments about the learning labs or the coaching cycles. It was maybe more about the CAT process. So,
Question, Dawn.
Yes.
How many teachers participated in, do you know roughly, like, or a percentage of teachers? I mean, the goal was to have every educator participating in this.
Yep.
But like thinking about the actual QComp program and making it all the way through to the stipend, maybe what is the percentage of teachers who made it to the
I
end?
would know that as we
Okay.
do our final piece, because some of our teachers might have retired or left in mid-year, and so then they don't qualify. You have to be teaching and complete the whole process in order to get that stipend at the end.
Okay.
So out of all of them, I don't know that because we're still trying to finish that process up.
Do you know if it's like most or?
It is most because
Okay.
it's a motivating factor for people. It's, I would say it's a high percentage. I mean, except for the people that actually left.
Okay.
The rest of them pretty much complete because, part of before you'll check them out, when we go through the process, you have to have green checks in all those boxes, and that says that you are done with that piece and eligible. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Can I ask a quick question here?
Yes.
So the motivation is the stipend, just to encourage them to participate.
Mm-hmm.
What is the expected outcome? Because when people are motivated by the money,
Right.
do they really take anything out of the learning? And what is the expectation after the learning? And what is the expected outcome?
I think the outcome is that they meet their goals and that we continue to improve student success, that it's directly correlated to student success and that they're working on developing their craft and the strategies that they need as an educator to be successful in the classroom. So hopefully at the end of this process, by participating in the formal observation cycle, the coaching cycle, and the learning labs and the CAT teams, they would have felt that they had opportunities to learn and grow, and that it improves their practice. And then ultimately that transitions into our students' success.
if the
Do
money-
all people feel that way about all of the pieces? I can't speak on that. I think, you would hope so, that even the people that are checking the boxes perhaps still learned something and had some value added to their craft.
How do you know if they actually took anything away from the learning?
Well, I think the conversations that the principals have with their teachers when they're doing the feedback, and also especially our probationary teachers, you would hope that you'd see some of that come back into play in the second and third observation, that you see growth, you can measure and see that growth. I think for our tenured staff, it's a little trickier because you only get one observation in. But you would hope that, again, through that coaching cycle, that they were connecting and feeling like they had that opportunity to develop.
Thank you.
And I think they can be a little more vulnerable with the coach than maybe the administrator. It's a little less threatening, perhaps, because it's not quite as evaluative.
Thank you.
So you mentioned, I think, that it's connected with student achievement in some way.
Yeah, their
How-
goal.
How
yeah.
do you do that?
They connect, like they might create a student achievement goal that says 80% of my students will achieve or get 80% or come to this threshold in FastBridge or a certain assessment that they're trying to give. They create a student achievement goal based on, it should align with the building goal. That was also, this year, I feel like the building goal and the individual goal matched better. Like if we're trying for 80% of our students are at grade level in literacy, what are they doing in their classroom to achieve, or what goal are they creating in their classroom to align with that goal?
Okay, so you alluded to it a minute ago. What is their goal for achieving their outcome? What money do they receive? $1?
That's the building goal,
Okay, what do they receive for their individual goal?
$124,
Okay, how much is the QComp stipend?
$13.50.
Okay, so this is when Governor Pawlenty pushed this program forward in 2006. It was considered for performance pay. Okay, so we want to incentivize people to do better, and if your students are doing better, we are going to pay more. What Stillwater is typical, I've been part of QComp most of my entire superintendent career. Districts have shifted away from the performance pay, where you will receive $1 or $125 in this case. But if you do all of these other things that go along with it, you're gonna get, over $1,000. So the original intent of QComp was performance pay. And as administrations have evolved over time, as MDE's evolved over time, it has shifted to what we have today, which is we are paying you, giving you opportunities to try new professional things, leadership, et cetera, but it has really shifted away from the performance incentives.
I think that's why I was, for me, the concern is something that should be required in terms of development, professional development for teachers in relation to student performance. there shouldn't be any, the incentives should actually be the overall performance, not necessarily because you're doing this. It should be a requirement. And if people are not given those incentives, no matter how important it is, they probably won't participate, knowing fully well that this is something that's supposed to improve, that's professional development opportunities. But because I'm paying you, you do it. So you're just coming in for the money, but not necessarily have that desire to really have an outcome that improves our students' performance. It's a concern. And I think Governor Pawlenty actually had a good, I remember the pay for performance. There was a lot of screams. You know, people were not too happy about it.
No,
initially.
some districts chose not to participate in it.
I remember that. Yeah. No, but I think it's if it does show the quality of opportunities for teachers. You'll get to it at the end of the day, but you know, from the shift, it looks like I just want to collect the money, regardless of the desire or passion to be a part of it or required, you know, to want to see students improve. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I think that's definitely a question, and I think promoting and shifting that needle so that people do see the value in it. I think because some of these pieces like the Learning Lab and the Collaborative Action Team, where they can actually see success and value just because they're participating, not just for the money, that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to make those pieces worth their time and effort, and that they can see those pieces. But it's, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, now we're getting into the philosophy of the program, and I agree with you that, you know, you are going to have teachers who are hungry for self-improvement, and they are going to take every opportunity that they are offered to try to make themselves into better educators. But, you know, people are not all alike, and not everybody is going to do that. And the other thing is that, you know, if you are measuring this program based only on student achievement, well, I mean, you know, students are not blueberries, right? I mean, that's a whole, you know, argument about they're not widgets.
Right.
And so, you know, and teachers are not the only input into whether students are going to achieve. So you've got these two approaches, these two philosophies on this whole thing. And, you know, you're just trying to find that middle ground, you know, that makes sense, because you want to give the opportunity to teachers to
Right.
improve their instruction.
And you want that teacher retention, so you want to support teachers so they want to remain in the profession. So that's another measurement, I think, is who is staying, especially those probationary teachers, that they're going through that whole cycle and continuing to stay with our district, because that helps our students, you know, to have that continuity. And I believe that every teacher wants to learn and grow. I think there's a lot of demands on teachers in order to do that. And again, you know, we're working to try to develop a process that provides them the support to take those risks and try to get that growth and student achievement. So, but it is, you're asking good questions.
One of the interesting things that you just mentioned is achievement. In my experience with QComp, there's nothing that ties a teacher's goal to necessarily achievement. It could be student growth. So for example, if kids come in at here and student's goal or the teacher's goal is, I want my kids' proficiency, every individual in my classroom to increase proficiency by, you know, 10% of wherever their baseline is, then that becomes a doable goal, because oftentimes you get teachers who say, okay, 60% of my kids are reading at grade level, and in the previous grade, now I'm supposed to get measured on getting them to 80%. So I think it's really incumbent upon the district administration working with the teachers to really identify, okay, what are some reasonable proficiency or growth goals that we can achieve that aren't just gonna be, yeah, we're gonna be at 80% and that's why you see, I think, a lot of places, well, they're never gonna reach 80%, so we're gonna reduce the amount of what we were gonna compensate them for their goal. And so they put the money elsewhere. So I think it's really important for the district to, okay, identify, all right, is student growth gonna be a measure? Is student attendance gonna be a measure? What are we gonna take a look at that we can, that we can at least have some influence on, knowing that there are a number of external factors out there as well. So that's just.
Part of the process to include some sort of survey with your students and how they're feeling in the classroom. That's part of the teacher development evaluation process as well, when you're at that summative piece.
Can I throw it up? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, both of you have a question.
So,
Go ahead.
hopefully I'm not stepping too far out of the fence here. The end game is the students improving, right? And that's measured a lot in their test scores, and maybe by attendance, parent feedback, or whatever. And a lot of the things that we've discussed over the days, months, years, is these things that improve students. BAR, the schedule changes, the calendar changes, block scheduling, curriculum review, all with the same intent, the end game. How do we know which one is having the actual effect that we're wanting?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure how to tease out all of those when you're looking at all those different components. Yeah, that is a valid
But there's
question.
research that says teachers have a significant amount of influence, probably more than all the things you just mentioned.
Right.
On student improvement.
All right, thanks.
But to say, if you're a bar school and you set this goal and you had some other component happening, which one made the biggest impact? Again, the teachers, we know that their work is super valuable, but then how do you tease out those other components and what kind of a difference and impact it's making is tricky in education.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, thank you. All you guys are kind of bouncing ideas off that I'm having as well. I think the big takeaway for me is I feel like we need a little bit more data to kind of measure how this program is improving it sounds like our workforce, our teachers, and their professional development. And maybe not so much on actual student achievement tied directly to that. Seems like that's not the model that we're going for, which as a former teacher, I can definitely value that that amount of time and effort that goes into the teacher's ability to improve themselves, and how there aren't very many opportunities to get paid for all that extra work.
Right.
And this is, while the district provides all kinds of time for professional development, they can't always provide extra pay for that professional development. So I like that this program incentivizes working with colleagues and improving and using data to kind of reflect on your own teaching, and providing a stipend for that work. So I do value that piece, even if it isn't tied directly to student achievement. But I still feel like we need to measure something here to figure out. And I think Dr. Funk was throwing out some ideas, and Director Kelsenberg too, of kind of what we can kind of track to figure out how well this program is impacting our workforce.
Yeah. And again, that retention data along with survey and, more concrete pieces. So I will take that back to the QComp committees so that they can think about that as they go forward.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, the 24, oops.
One question.
Yeah, sorry.
Dr.
No?
Pony?
No, I really appreciate what you all said, because I agree. I think if we align such learnings, professional development, where our teachers to students' achievement, we might be missing the mark there. We're talking about a change process. Regardless of what the change is, something that's positive for the student, and sometimes it doesn't have to be test scores, right?
Right.
So I think we need to reframe that. I think that was where the confusion is. A lot of teachers do great things. like my colleague here said, like what Bev said, it's not necessarily all of the teacher's responsibility when it comes to student achievements. We parents are also a part of it. Our community is a part of it, you know, so it's how we engage ourselves or involve ourselves in the process. So changing the idea of it being just student achievement will be great. In some cases, you see behavior changes. That's also a positive improvement.
Yep,
The
our
teacher might
behavior
have in a
data.
child's life. You might see confidence building, a sense of self, you know, confidence and all that might be a change. Where a student actually that doesn't really talk much gets involved in either speech, debate, or whatever, that's a change. These are some little positive things that might lead to something else. So I think changing the narrative in terms of what the expectations are or what it's supposed to be in terms of goals will be, I think maybe that's how we should approach that.
And I just want to make sure, you know, when we look at the 5D rubric that we use for teacher evaluation, you know, student engagement is a piece that they could choose as a component that they want to improve upon, classroom environment, and those are all important pieces. We learned that last year that, you know, out of the desired daily experiences, everyone wants to feel safe and valued and that they have a voice and choice, and all of those pieces are really important in order to get to the learning. So those are pieces that are developed within that process, especially like those learning labs and even the teacher evaluation process when the principal is going in and observing. They're looking for all those components, not just the achievement piece. So that's a really good point. Okay. 24-25 focus, because we have developed this centralized coaching model. So we have 6 district-wide coaches that will be working with all of our buildings. We're excited about that model as far as what it's going to look like, and it's still kind of evolving, but what we do know is that all of our probationary staff will still engage in a formal coaching cycle. We feel that's really important. We still want to continue our data inquiry processes within the CAT teams to inform instructional decisions. So teachers will still participate in that. What we're trying to do, if you heard me talking about in an ideal world about that whole teacher development evaluation process, we're looking at the state statute. T1 and T2 tenured teachers will engage in that learning lab or a formal coaching cycle. They'll get to choose because you have to have some sort of peer observation or formal evaluation as part of state statute. But we're trying to limit what our principals are doing in those formal observations to the probationary, which is by law, we have to do that 3 times a year. And then our T3 teachers would have a formal observation. And what we're hoping to do with that is that we would definitely have those post-observation meetings and really be able to provide that valuable feedback, specific and actionable, so that teachers feel that they can take that moving forward. And that our T1 and T2, the tenured staff, will engage in more of that learning lab from peers and the coaches in a less formal process. So another thing that we're going to do is our centralized coaches will push into our building instructional leadership teams. They're all assigned to one of the schools, as well as our teaching and learning staff, so that everybody kind of has a person that can, as we meet with coaches and teaching and learning staff, that we can figure out what the teachers need to support their goals in their building and their teaching staff in those processes. So that focus will shift a little bit in that not everyone will go through a coaching cycle, and that we're trying to hone in on that our T3s will get that formal evaluation process where the T1 and T2s will go through the learning lab and formal coaching cycle to choose. So that's where we're moving, and I will definitely make sure that we that they talk about some way to track, that progress in different ways, not just test scores and how that's helping them grow as learners and how it's helping our students in different components of the 5D rubric. Any other questions?
Other questions, comments?
Okay.
Otherwise, Dawn, thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on with the agenda, I'll go to a strategic direction B, fostering a safe, welcoming, and inclusive environment for all staff and students. Chief of Staff Chris Keister will join us to discuss some new state legislation around cell phone policy and the timeline and process that we'll have in place. So, Chris.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Funk. Last month, Superintendent Funk presented some new legislation and some of the updates that our legislators put in place, and one of those was a school cell phone policy. They didn't legislate what that policy should be, just that we do need to have a policy in place. We currently do not have a school board approved policy, so this would be something that would be brand new to our district. And because cell phones are quite a big deal, right? Everybody's got their cell phone. If we have students in our lives, kids in our lives, we know that they are kind of connected to those cell phones. It's a really important part of their life. And so this is kind of a big conversation we want to have with our community. What does that mean when we look at our policy moving forward? Should we allow cell phones? When should they be allowed? Should we ban cell phones? What does that look like? There is a lot of conversation about this on a national level. You've probably read newspaper articles about school districts who have banned them, or if they have different policies in place to kind of dictate when they can be used and not used. So our plan, going to the next slide, is to have a conversation about this with our community. We want to make sure that we're hearing from our students themselves, from families, from our staff. This is a big issue for staff. I think if you talk to our staff, and we've had some conversations already, they will tell you that cell phones can be a distraction to the school day, definitely. Kids have become addicted, and adults too, it's not just kids. We're all addicted to our cell phones, so we don't always even know that we're on them. I've heard teachers talk about that, where they tell a kid to put a cell phone in their pocket, they do, and 5 seconds later it's in their hand again, and it's almost like, where did that come from? They don't even know, it's just a part of them. So because this has such an impact on our entire community, we want to get feedback from everyone that has ideas and wants to give us their thoughts. So our plan is to go out, do a little bit of research, see what other districts are doing, how people are handling it, what implementation might look like if we were to put some policies in place that would restrict the use of cell phones, because it is such a big issue. How could we actually implement that well? Gather feedback from our community, have some surveys, focus groups, online conversations to get people to share their ideas with us of what they think a policy would look like. Ultimately, it's up to the policy committee working with administration to come up with a draft policy, and then like your usual process, we would bring that forward for a first reading, allow the community to give some more input on what the actual policy looks like, and our goal would be to try to approve something later this winter, maybe in December, with a possible implementation for sometime in semester 2. The policy law that they put in place is that we need to have something adopted by March 15th of 2025. So we could adopt a policy, and then the implementation is still up in the air of when we want to actually put that into place. But we do need to do this work in the fall and the winter. So open to any thoughts or ideas you have, but this is what we're proposing, is kind of a community engagement timeline to get feedback from our community.
Sure. With a lot of our policy discussions and whatnot, I tend to ask, hey, what are our neighboring schools doing? The thing is, they're all probably having the same discussion right now too, having to come up with policies. I think some of them do have policies already. So I would suggest going further out, other schools in the nation
Yes.
that have had policies and that have shown success or failure, and any feedback from that.
And that's really the first stage, is that research phase. So for the summer, the next couple of months, we're starting to do that work of looking to see what are some good practices others have adopted, what are some policies that are out there that we could look at. So that's already kind of happening. I think there's research out there about kind of the pros and cons around cell phones, right? Like, we know that there's a mental health issue that we're seeing because of cell phone use. Our schools are telling us that there's behavior issues that are happening just because kids are connecting, and sometimes not for the best reasons, and they're planning things and they're leaving class, and it's kind of creating some discipline behavior issues too. So there's definitely some negatives to cell phone use, but there's positives as well, right? I mean, We have kids who use medical devices that are on their phone. They can track their blood sugar. I mean, there's real reasons why kids need to have cell phones. So that's why we want to engage with our community, is to really understand what it means here in Stillwater schools.
The concern about implementing a stringent cell phone policy, it's only as effective as the weakest link. So, you know, I know a district near us that has just said already, okay, boom, start August of, or September this year, we are gonna ban cell phones. Well, okay, that's an edict coming down from on high, but again, it's only as strong as the weakest link. So teachers get pressured, and then suddenly this teacher lets it happen, so-and-so lets it happen, and then you got a problem. So the approach we're taking here is we want this to be a wider community discussion. And we want to hear the impacts, as Carissa was stating about cell phones. But at the end of the day, we'll have significant community input, and the board will make a decision on whatever that looks like. And then we will turn to our staff and say, the community and the school board have spoken, here's where we're at. And so really it's putting more of a, not just, okay, the superintendent said so, but okay, this is a robust discussion that if we want to start to limit cell phones, this is good for kids and this is why. And this is why you need to enforce it. So whether that's completely successful or not, well, that remains to be seen. But that's kind of the methodology behind having the bigger, longer discussion on this.
I seem to recall that when this is going through the legislature, another corollary to that was that they were calling upon secondary principals to come up with best practices. Do you know what their timeline is? Because this is kind of a quick timeline here. So is that even going to be a factor in our decision-making?
It could be, you know, and it could, this is just, again, this is a concept at this point. I would imagine they will have something out this fall because, I mean, this school board's deadlines are gonna be, you know, March. And so they're gonna wanna have some time to discuss, okay, what this could look like. I can certainly ask that question of other districts and find out where they're at on it. But I would imagine there should be a working group that would be starting off fairly quickly here, like in the next month or two.
Now.
Yeah. So I think there's some, hopefully we'll get some best practices out of that, but I think the nationwide discussion on what other districts are doing nationally are, I think that are probably ahead of Minnesota is just as valuable.
Thought on this. First of all, thank you for giving us this timeline. This is helpful to kind of see the big picture. And from what it sounds like, we are trying to take more of a holistic view. So it's not just a policy that the school board would pass and then everybody has to follow. It sounds like we're trying to do kind of a grassroots attempt at understanding what the values are, what the needs of our teachers and staff and our students and our families and our community expectations. So I appreciate kind of that big picture view. And I appreciate also, it sounds like you're going to be collecting some practical tips along the way of the implementation piece, kind of the procedural piece. So we'll pass the policy, but then there will have to be a whole plan for how this is going to roll out. And I hope that that can be very much part of the plan so that whatever policy we create actually can be implemented, so we don't have those weakest links, and so that that there is that buy-in, so that we can create hopefully something that feels very inclusive and is useful in our schools. So I think you guys are on a great track in planning
I think
this.
that's why the conversation needs to happen early on, so we can understand what are the challenges we might run into, what are the concerns or questions that people have, so that as we're developing a plan for whatever the policy is, we know how to best implement it.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions?
Otherwise, yeah, no, thank you for your work on this. And one thing I would love to see is, I think we've done a really great job around some of these other big discussion points of school start times and the calendar and having those websites and those resources and bringing in Dr. Meltzer for the sleep study. I love that approach that we've taken in the past. I would love to see if we can replicate that in terms of having a kind of a source of truth of information that we can direct people to.
Yes,
So-
good. Thank you for that feedback. I'm glad that that has worked well. We do have a lot of good examples of things that we've done in the past, and I think there's even some things that we can improve built based on what we've learned from the last couple of years.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
All right, great. All right, moving on to strategic direction C, utilize systems and align resources in an efficient manner to support learning. Joining us will be Mark Drummerhausen, Director of Operations, to provide a report on the district's long-term facility maintenance 10-year plan. So, Mark, thank you for
Good
joining us.
evening. There's kind of two parts to this presentation. The first one is the 10-year plan, and then is also be the projects for fiscal year 26, or the projects that'll be happening next summer, summer of 2025. As we put the 10-year plan together, it's always a balance of trying to minimize taxpayer dollars, but also try to keep our facilities up to date and keep them as modern as we can. So as we go through this, we're really trying to balance the taxpayers as well as our facility needs in each of these areas. This 10-year plan is a fluid document. So today we're just here talking about all the projects. We'll be coming back at the next meeting looking to take action on our 10-year plan. When we take action on the 10-year plan, we're really just taking action on that first year of the 10-year plan, because as things shift and move, that number of projects in each building can look different from year to year. For instance, if you look back to last year's, before a referendum passed, we had projects for Lake Elmo and for Anderson listed. Now, as you look at our 10-year plan, we don't have projects for those facilities because we'll have replacement buildings for both Anderson and Lake Elmo moving forward. So it's a continual fluid moving document from year to year is our 10-year plan. When you look at the 10-year plan also, you'll notice that it's color-coded. And so just to kind of give you an idea of some of the bigger ticket items by schools, if there's a couple $1 million spent there, just to give you an idea of what it is. It's not the specific dollar amount for that. So for instance, if it's an orange color, means it's mechanical, whether it's boilers or something mechanical that's being replaced. If it's yellow, it's a roof. And some buildings, it's a bigger amount because the whole roof's replaced at once. Some of the larger square footage size buildings, the roof is being repaired in cycles. So it's kind of a third one year, a third the next, and so forth. So just to give you an idea of the color coding of what those bigger ticket items are in that 10-year plan moving forward. So I'm going to stop here at the 10-year plan and kind of ask questions. The next part of it, I'm going to get into next year, so the FY26, and it's kind of the individual projects by building and answer questions from the individual project standpoint. So any questions on the 10-year plan before we really dive into the FY26 plan? So anyways, we can always move back to that if you need. Now, moving into what's up on the screen and what you have in your packet is kind of the summary list. I'm not going to go through them one by one, building by building, but you will notice there are projects at each of our buildings, except for, like I mentioned before, Anderson and Lake Elmo. These projects are put together in collaboration with the many different groups of individuals. So it's our district staff in collaboration with our building principals, in collaboration with our head engineers at each of our buildings, with Wold, our construction team, our architect team, and Kraus Anderson, our construction team, to kind of see what the needs are and what's most urgent from year to year. So just some of the highlights. The total for all the projects is $10,064,370. Just a few sample of just kind of the highlights of some of the things that are happening is we're continuing the classroom remodel at Lily Lake. So we started the last couple of years just kind of working our way around the building. There's 8 classrooms that are kind of getting a refresh, and refresh means ceiling, lights, carpet, casework, sinks, piping, et cetera, those sorts of things at Lily Lake. At Oakland Middle School, there's a boiler, and this is intentional. So as we go into next summer, now we'll start to do with the bond project, start to do some of the addition at Oakland as well as some of the remodel. And so as we're doing some of the remodeling and we're opening up some of the ceilings and doing some of the work there, it's intentionally that we'll replace the boilers at that time to kind of be efficiency with our costs, as well as replacing the pool ventilation unit in the Oakland swimming pool. Rutherford as a rooftop in the gym area. There's different areas, but the rooftop gym at Rutherford. At the high school, our track, this is one that kind of got moved up a little bit with just some of the things that happened this spring with our surface at the track. We had to move that up a couple of years. That needs to be replaced sooner than we anticipated. So we're resurfacing the track at the high school, and then replacing the press box and sound system in Pony Stadium as well. At the high school as well as replacing the ceiling and lights in the cafeteria. And then you'll notice quite a bit of parking lot work, seal coating at Afton, Brookview, the Early Childhood Center, Rutherford, Stillwater Middle School, and the high school. So that's just a sampling. I'll open up to questions specifically about any building or any projects that you may have, but wanted to give you just a quick overview of kind of the process of the 10-year plan. But then also more specifically, we're looking at that FY26 or next summer projects really in detail right now. And then next week next meeting, we come back for action. So with that, I'll open it up. Yes.
Okay, here's kind of a silly little question, but kind of jumped out at me. Replace chalkboards at Lily Lake. Are we replacing them with chalkboards, or are we replacing them with whiteboards?
They will be
or
whiteboards, but we do,
smartboards?
nope, so it can't be technology. So it's,
Curious
nope.
about-
So we do have chalkboards that we replace with whiteboards. We can't replace it with the technology, but it will replace with whiteboards. That way, yes, we do have chalkboards
But
still
they're
in some of
actually
our building.
chalkboards?
Correct, yes.
Okay. How many other chalkboards do we have in our elementary?
There's a smattering around. I mean, this is a silly example. When the high school was built in the early 1990s, the teachers who, it wasn't uniformed in terms of we're putting whiteboards in it was really the teacher that was there had a choice of do they want a chalkboard or do they want a whiteboard. So there is still a smattering around. So as we do some of the classroom refreshes, that we are replacing chalkboards with whiteboards.
So we have to buy erasers then, too.
I'm not sure how much they're used, but they are there. Some of them are covered up, with bulletin boards and those sorts of things, but
Yeah.
they are still on the walls.
So this is just a reminder, okay? So we have a sign out here that says elementary school. So we probably want to, since this is Oak Park Learning Center, I don't know if we can get that done this summer.
If you look at Oak Park, it says exterior, replace the building signage. Part of that is to replace this here with Oak Park Learning Center.
Okay.
So that is in the plan right here.
And then Afton Lakeland, sign.
We are working on that.
Okay.
Yep. It's on our list. We have not forgot about it. That is on the list.
Okay, just remind,
Yep.
well, we're talking summer work, so I thought I'd ask.
Yep, we got it.
Other questions?
All right, thank you.
And then, and then, Mark, still safe here then?
For the 916.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, you want
Mark,
to
just
touch
stay
base
up real
on
quick
the-
with the 916?
Yeah.
So, you just want to run through that, but there's a need
so-
to, go ahead.
So I'll be quick. Sorry about that. I forgot I had 2 items. So the second one is a similar process that we go with our district. We do have a collaborative of 916 that goes through a same process as well. So there's 13 member districts with 916. And as they go through their process, the costs get deferred to the 13 different districts. So their total from a 916 standpoint is $467,100. Our portion is 10% of that. So for us, we will pay $46,544 to 916. That dollar amount will show up when we come the next meeting with our 10-year plan with our expenditures and revenue. Our pass-through of the $46,000 that goes to 916 will appear on our MDE application for that amount for 916. So each of the 13 member districts have to approve it at a board meeting, go through the resolution, and then once all 13 members approve, then 916 can move forward with their LTFM projects for FY26.
You said we're 10%, but there's 13 districts. Is that just because we're a larger user or a larger?
No,
district, or-
Marie's a lot smarter than I am in putting it this, but there's 2 components in doing this. Half the rate, so it's a percentage base, so half of the rate is based on the net tax capacity of the district, and the other half is a ratio of ADM utilization. So it's not a straight, that we have 10% of the population, so we pay 10%. There's a more complex formula to derive who pays what percentage.
Right, thanks.
Other questions? Otherwise, this There's a need for a resolution to approve the Northeast Metro 916 long-term facility maintenance budget. I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, Director Hockert with a second, and then this is a resolution. Joan, roll call, please.
Director Hocker?
Yes.
Director Kelsenberg?
Yes.
Director Lauer?
Yes.
Director Petrie?
Yes.
Director Porbenny?
Yep.
Director Thelander?
Yes.
Resolution passes.
Thank you, Mark. All right, next up is Executive Director of Finance, Maria Sherrill, provide an update on the fiscal year 24-25 preliminary budget. So Maria, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, superintendent. This evening will be the fiscal year 25, the second to the last budget update for this year. I was just listening to Mark and just thinking, wow, he's already doing fiscal year 26. So I'm behind a little bit. So with that, I will just kind of highlight a few things here. Our priority-based budgeting framework, again, we're focusing on putting together our resources and aligning that to literacy, school culture, equity and inclusion, and also social emotional learning and mental health. Those are our three strategic plan priorities for this upcoming school year. Again, looking at those projections for our current year and also being mindful of those expenditures and that fund balance that's currently still at that projection of 1.1% with the unassigned. Though the enrollment, again, has a large impact on our revenue, and then also be mindful of that class size, building capacity, which in a couple years we'll be able to expand that. And contractual settlements, again, this budget does account for a lot of contractual settlements that have occurred over the past couple months, and legislative adjustments as we continue to see those. One that came out of the recent legislation, again, READ Act, as we continue to hear about that, we'll update our budget accordingly. And then bond ratings, again, they do have an impact on the budget, an indirect impact, as we know, with interest if our financial picture wavers. And then funding, that's one time only, and that's one piece that impacted us with the federal dollars. So with that, just highlighting our unassigned fund balance history, again, as we close our fiscal year 24, in the next couple of months, we'll give you updates accordingly. Right now, we're looking to be stable, but we are closing the fiscal year in a positive, which is always good, but we'll continue to update the board on what those results look like, and of course, we'll give you some additional financial results over the summer. Again, where we sit today with our priority-based budgeting, we will have a budget publication, or what we call the preliminary budget book, that we hope to get to the board and the community either Friday or Monday for publication. So that has a lot more detail than the presentations you've been seeing with a lot of the different activity and the different investments.
Maria, are you talking about this Friday?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, good. I
We've
was
been
wondering.
trying to get that put together with some of the changes and additions that we've been adding with different contract settlements, things like that. Just making sure it's updated, most up to date for you. And then, again, this just highlights the strategic initiatives for next year. And then just bringing us back to our process with priority-based budgeting. Again, taking that step back on our 4 different methods. The expand, just highlighting BAR, Amigos Unidos, literacy, and also what we, just some of the areas, keeping the contingency staffing in the budget, social emotional support pathways. These again, highlighting just some of the areas. This is not all inclusive. Fixing, replacing the instructional coaching model, as Dawn had mentioned. We did eliminate some FTEs there. Some were funded with the federal COVID funds. Achievement and integration and data analysis, those ways, the models there, just changing the way the service and different ways of providing that service for the district. And then ESSER and ARP positions, there were a couple student engagement specialists and another position that went to another source of grant funding. Additional staffing, there were middle school model positions and some additional FTEs that were added with enrollment, which again resets during our fiscal year process. We also did, with additional staffing, we did add a MLL teacher, multilingual learners teacher for next year to support the growth in students. And with our transportation services, we did have a reduction in our route services, so that was a reduction. So that total reduction realignment you see there is just shy of 1.8 million of reductions and reallocations overall in the priority-based budgeting process that we went through this year. And then just to highlight big picture, as you look at our revised budget to our preliminary budget, we are just shy of 150 million on our revenue side, and then our expenditures are 150.2 million. That balance there is we are using some of our operating capital dollars. We are investing in some of, we have some planned capital projects, and we are also investing in a wireless network project that we have to, we allocate the funds up front. It's eligible for some E-rate funding, but it's on the back end, we get reimbursed, but we will be doing a wireless network project over the next year. So what you'll see there is a proposed balanced budget, and I'll just highlight some of the different areas and pause if there are any questions after each slide. So first and foremost is the general fund revenue. Again, the first line is property tax, the levy that was last December when that was approved by the board. The larger increases there of the 4.8 million, again, highlighting that technology levy, that was just over $1 million increase. And then the other larger area would be our referendum that as your enrollment and the inflation with the referendum, there are larger increases that continue with that, that levy. So those are just some of the things that contribute to the property taxes. State aids, that's the per pupil funding formula that changed from 7,138 to 7,281 with our legislative session last year. That's the larger component. That's about 1.3 million of that $1.7 million increase. And then we also saw a slight increase in our special ed component of our revenue. And then the third area up there is our federal grants and title programs. Again, We will be utilizing some more of our federal special ed entitlement, about $863,000. And then our federal, on a separate line, the COVID funds, those are going away. They expire in September. We are utilizing the rest and spending that down through June. And then this is just our miscellaneous revenue gifts, and those stay pretty stable throughout the year. So with that, just about $6.6 million overall increase from our revised budget earlier this spring. And on the expenditure side, you'll see this is by category, and I'll just kind of run through some of these. The administration is more of the areas that support the programs, so that is just shy of $100,000. District support services, so that would be, for example, HR, finance, any of the programs that are supporting district-wide. About $800,000, and that's not only salary, but all of the other areas that go with that. So the next couple, the regular vocational and special education instruction, that is all of your support for students out in the buildings. That's your instructional side. That includes MLL, multilingual learners. That is all your instructional. That includes salary, materials. So that's just shy of about 3.5 million. That is the increase. Majority of that, as we look at the next slide, is going to be in salary. And you'll see that theme throughout the presentation in a lot of these different programs. Instructional support services, that is going to be more of your teaching and learning area. You'll see that there was a decrease there. That's because of the coaches, more of the area that was a priority-based budgeting area that was a reduction. Pupil support services, that is more of your social worker counseling area. You'll see a slight increase there. And then transportation, we had not only inflation in the transportation, but we also had a reduction in our routes. So that almost netted even, but the transportation inflation there was pretty significant. So again, we had just about an even budget there. Sites and buildings, this is where your operations, your fixed costs, your utilities, all of the items that Mark just presented with your long-term facility maintenance, about $1.1 million increase. That's where that fund balance is being utilized. And then fiscal and other fixed costs will be coming to you at the end of June with our insurance, and that's a renewal. And so there was an increase in our insurance overall for the district. So again, just highlighting it that way, you can see some of the overall changes, about $5.8 million. And again, we're not even with the revenue because we're starting at a higher point with our revised budget. We used some of our fund balance when we revised our budget earlier this spring for some projects. So just showing you that, or pointing that out, because revenue and expenditures do not equal. And that was mindful because we're using some of our fund balance with our capital.
Your capital fund balance.
Correct. Correct.
I have a question. So I was looking at the percentages on each of these line items, and they're all pretty consistent within like 2.5% to 5%, which is pretty much what we can expect from inflation these days, but there were two outliers. One was fiscal and other costs, and you've just explained that insurance, which is just kind of insane out there these days. But the
Yes.
other one was 9.4% on district support services. Can you explain a little bit more why that was an increase? And also, my other question is, are we going to get detail on that line item when the book comes out?
You will get line by line detail.
Okay.
Yes, yes, it'll be in the back of the budget book.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on why that one went up almost 10%?
The district support services does support the overall, the OPEBs in there, the insurance lines, some more of our tuition billing is in there, along with some of the levies that we support for the 916 Northeast Metro. So it could be some of those areas that I know had cost increases overall. So I can certainly provide that detail to you in advance so that you,
Okay.
that you have that.
PSEO went up significantly.
Yes, yes, that
So
was
the
one
cost
area.
that for our students who are going to
Career and tech
Century
ed.
so that was significant increase that
The tuition,
that we saw. So that's I don't, that's the
That
line
comes
number.
that comes on that line item.
yeah, it's like
I
a
think so.
tuition out category.
Okay.
But I can certainly provide that detail to you.
Thank you.
And then as you look at the, another way of looking at this is salaries, benefits, purchase services, supply materials, and other. You'll see that salaries are the major component of the increases in the budget. Looking at that last column, about 3.5 million over this current fiscal year, with benefits being about $500,000, and due to the plan change, there were just about $500,000 of that projected increase. Purchase services, again, the larger components there will be those capital projects and the LTFM, and the supply materials and other, that's where insurance is the major component there, along with the tuition rates was the other piece, or the career and tech, PSEO, post-secondary enrollment options. Those were the areas we're seeing significant increase of students enrolling at those, the college opportunities, which is, does have a cost to it for the district, but a benefit for students. So those were just some areas that we noticed overall.
Marie, forgive me if this is a naive question, but how does that work with PSEO? How does that become an expenditure in the tuition piece? Are we paying to the universities? Does that come out of our per pupil units? Like how does that work? Just in a short summary, high level.
There's a contract that the district has with different colleges, and we pay a very reduced rate for the students. There's different, we pay a reduced rate per credit for students to enroll. One, for example, is Century College. We also have college in the schools where there's actual teachers that teach in the high school, and students can gain credit that way where there isn't a cost. But there are options where students do enroll in, for example, Century or other colleges where we pay per credit, but it's very reduced.
Who gets to count the student?
Well, it's a joint effort. We confirm the student enrollment with the college.
Where does the state aid flow?
The state aid flows to the district.
right? So the
Yeah.
state aid flows to the district, so we get to count the student, but then we pay tuition
Correct.
for the student to attend. So if more kids are going, which happened this year, and this is why our budget is going up, is we are now we're writing a check basically for our students to go to college somewhere else, or go to college and not be in school.
Okay, so the district is paying for the credits that the students are earning
Right.
at a reduced rate,
Yes,
but
we're
but
paying.
we are paying.
But we
for
get,
that.
we get to keep the state aid. So that's the good thing about it, but then we're paying it. So one of the things that really Marie and both of them uncovered this year is, okay, if we're seeing a significant increase in our numbers going out, then that should impact our staffing allocations at the high school. Because if we have, say, we have 200 more kids going post-secondary, well, then we have 200 less kids at the school we have to staff for. So we're starting to catch up with that and say, okay, when we're making, budget adjustments and plans for the future, that's how we can mitigate some of the cost impacts by reducing staff.
Do we have any idea why this year we had such a increase? Was there a, I don't know, greater effort to recruit kids to go to PSEO, or?
I'm not sure, but I think one of the things we're looking at with the different schedules we've been looking at is, okay, we can now provide some maybe more unique opportunities here that they wouldn't necessarily have to go someplace else for. But I don't have a quick answer for you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a quick question here?
Absolutely.
I know we also teach some college classes here. Is there another way? How do we pay for those?
So that's even a cheaper route to go. So basically, we have an agreement with the universities that our teachers are certified or by the colleges because of their level of education to teach a college in the schools course. The kids stay here. I think that's even a reduced rate because it's our teachers doing it. But that's another opportunity for our kids to stay here in our building and earn credit. And so one of the tensions in secondary schools these days is, do we continue to add more college in the schools courses? Do we continue to go down the AP route as far as advanced placement, which, AP credits are much more universal. Most colleges take them. College in the schools credits, they're accepted in Minnesota, maybe some in Wisconsin, but they're not universal. So that's part of the discussions that are going on.
And then last slide that I have here is a projection of all of the funds and just putting together that big picture. What you'll see here is just a projection of our July 1 fund balance. And again, just highlighting the general fund overall. I just put some information down on the bottom of this slide because the fund balance is more lumped together as a total when the auditors report it. And you'll see the categories as of July 1, just putting that projection together and incorporating that fund balance that we used this year for the capital projects. 9.5 million overall. But if you pull off those first four categories, they report on GASB, Governmental Accounting Standards Board. The non-spendable is more your inventory fund balance. Restricted is where that operating capital or your ALC fund balance is. Assigned are for categories that we have as, say, district initiatives, and committed is usually where your severance falls. I think we have severance in our assigned. But those are more things that are set aside, and that's projected at 7.9 million. Where our unassigned is, or board policy, is staying stable at that 1.6 million or 1.1%. So we're going into our next year budget at that 9.5 million. And as you can see, that top line as you walk it across, our revenue, less expenditures, the use of that fund balance is coming off of that 7.9 or that restricted fund balance. Our intent is not to use unassigned. It's using some of that operating capital or restricted dollars, not our unassigned or that 1.1%. And so it does look like our fund balance is decreasing, but it's a mindful or planned spend of some of our capital dollars that we've had over time for some of those capital projects.
So just a couple of points of clarification. So you mentioned we were going to take some capital dollars for wireless, okay? So then the wireless, a portion of that, I don't know what it's 40%, what the percentage is reimbursable through the federal government. So that will flow right back into capital. So that basically protects the tech levy, and we allow it to be utilized for other pieces. All right.
Correct.
The other piece here is, you're looking at a $1.6 million fund balance as of, this coming July as we're closing the books out. So I'm not asking you to be a prognosticator here, but I'm asking you to be a prognosticator. So when the auditor comes back in November and says, okay, we've closed the books, here's where things are going to be, are you very confident that we will be at that 1% as a fund balance?
I'm being conservative because that's my approach. I think we'll be a little higher, but I'm being conservative because I haven't seen the last 6 payrolls hit with all of our different
right. But that's why I'm asking.
Settlements.
But
So
the board can feel comfortable.
I like to tell the board that in a conservative way or very cautious way that we'll be at the 1.1, but I'm planning that will be a little higher.
So what I want the board to hear
Because
is
I
that
like
we are
to
at rock
be-
bottom and you don't see us going any lower with that unassigned, and, in a cautious manner, you're hopefully optimistic that we will see a slight increase to that as we close out the books. Okay.
Correct.
You just passed the test.
There you go. I like passing tests.
Question. What will be the biggest impact or influence on these numbers that might change them or tweak them along the way? Let me just guess, new housing and whatever.
If there's any, I'll just say, if there's any surprises or residual invoices from the past, I'll just say if there's anything that,
Yeah, we've had a number of surprises over
Yes.
the past 18 months that were
Yeah.
unplanned for, as we're identifying things that have occurred prior to our coming here. And so with that caveat, I think, I think we are becoming more and more confident moving forward that we've uncovered most of everything. But to your point, what my biggest impact on this is our student enrollment. Okay, so if our enrollment continues to trend at projection, we'll be in decent shape. But that's the biggest thing that's hanging out there. So tied directly to housing.
Sure, okay.
And then how about from the state? I mean, are there still some legislative
Yeah.
things hanging out there? that we're not sure about?
I think one of them, and Chris and I were just talking about this, I think earlier this week, or late last week. You know, we have this new, it's not safe in sick time, but it's the other one, it's the
PFML.
What is it?
PFML.
Where the family medical leave can take place, so you get 20, they can get 20 weeks. So there's I think it's what is it, 0.8 or? It used to be 0.7 something percent, now it's 0.88. And, you know, when they talked about it at the legislature, they said, well, this can be split between the employee and the district. And so my impression was employees were gonna have to pay 0.44 as a payroll tax. The district would have to pay 0.44. Now, come to find out, nope, you need to negotiate that. So now that is going to be a piece of negotiations that was not necessarily planned for. We have another year till that comes into effect, but that's just another. The other one is we are continuing to see significant spikes in summer unemployment for our hourly people. It has now become, the word is out, okay, you can do this. And so there's a cost to that we really haven't fully realized yet. And tied to that is the state's allocation for that summer unemployment. I think it was only $27 million or something. It wasn't very much. I think that's going to run out very soon if it hasn't already. So then the districts will be totally holding the bag completely on that.
One other one I'd like to add to the superintendent on the legislature is the READ Act. There is about $300,000 of funding. It's not included in this proposed budget because we're still waiting to hear how they are going to apply all that information. So that'll be part of our revised budget when we go forward. So as we get additional information, we'll build that into our revised. So there is a piece from the legislature there.
That was actually my question, because I was wondering how that was going to get baked into this coming year, because, and again, thank you, because, you know, I mean, this wasn't a funding year, but it's, you know, they don't finish until the third week in May, and then you have to just go like a hamster in a wheel trying to figure out what our budget is going to be like for the coming year, and so thank you for doing that. But I was just curious about what you were going to bake in for the READ Act for the coming budget.
There's two components to it, and you might already have one of them in there, but one of them used to be the literacy aid for third grade. So now they're saying that is now part of the READ Act. And then the other piece of the READ Act is what they're going to give us for professional development. And then you're going to have to make an agreement with your bargaining units on how you're going to compensate your teachers for professional development, and that money will be utilized to do that. So I don't think in a general sense we're going to see an additional, a lot of good revenue coming out of it, because I think it's going to be tied up to MOUs. And the other piece of the READ Act is money we already received through literacy aid. They're just renaming it.
Correct. Just to highlight just the other funds, food service from last year, just over the current year we have, they're seeing an overall increase of about $600,000 in state aid. That again is being offset significantly by salary increase. Community service, again, they're seeing an increase of about $500,000 on the revenue side. And a lot of that, again, is mostly salary and benefits on their expenditure side. Building construction, just highlighting there, you will start to see the fund balance of the bond issue that we sold earlier this year. So when you see that negative $36,000 change in fund balance, don't worry, that is the bond money that we are now using. We had a meeting with our financial investment advisor, or financial, one of them, our advisor, and we'll again start to determine when we're going to issue the second half of those bonds. And then again, debt service again has your escrow activity and the bond schedule payments. So again, those are just paying off those bond schedules, and then the custodial account is more for those the flow through of the student scholarship funds. So again, we just hold the funds on behalf of the student activities. So again, with that, you'll see that the district's budget is now $219.9 million. So we have gone over into the 200 million mark this fiscal year. And that brings us to the timeline. On the 25th, I'll be putting together a brief presentation for the board to approve. Within the next few days, you will receive again, the budget book. No later than Monday is our goal to get that to you. We want to make sure that you have that at least a week to review the information. And with that, that concludes tonight's update.
Other questions or comments?
So what we'll be approving next meeting is pretty much what we heard right now, just with some
There shouldn't
tweaks.
be any
Okay.
significant changes.
You mentioned the budget book. That'll be coming up soon.
Yes.
Monday, the latest.
No later than Monday,
Okay.
this coming Monday.
Great. Other questions?
Oh, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Kind of going back several slides. The only thing in the reductions category that I think might impact directly families would be that transportation reduction. Do we have any idea when decisions are going to be made for that impact on families?
We want to identify the individuals that are going to be impacted before we blast out an announcement saying
Okay.
people are going to be impacted, because then they're going to start, okay, is it me, is it me, is it me? So I would say within a month, we should have an answer on, okay, routing. It's primarily the secondary level.
Okay, so sometime this summer.
Yep.
So people
And
have
then I
plenty
know
of
there's some
time to.
gate families asking questions, and we'll try to roll all that out at once.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Marie. Appreciate it. All right, up next is Christine Carlston, Executive Director of Human Resources, who will review the terms of the Principal Master Agreement. So Chris, thank you for joining us.
Good evening, board members, superintendent. Yeah, we are very pleased to have reached a settlement with our principal group. So this is the highlights. You've kind of seen this before, but we did settle at 4% in year one, and that's for half the year, similar to the teachers. So they'll have retro pay on half of their days worked. And then 4.5% in year two, steps in both years. The same medical insurance changes that we made with the other groups apply to this group. Principals already had longevity in their agreement, and so we did increase that from 500 to 1,000 at 5 years and from 1,000 to 2,000 in 10 years. Increased 403B percentage contribution with a cap of 550. Both of those are slight adjustments up. And then we added the elementary AP position to be aligned with the middle school AP position, so they're in the same lane. So now we have actually a defined spot for that. So when I looked at the comparators for this group, there were about 7 in the area, and I took a high and low average, because with the principal group, we are lagging a little bit behind the group. So when I looked at the high and low average and where we landed now, we are very much aligned with that high and low average. We're a little bit lagging still on the low end, but we're right in there on the high end. Any questions?
Comparator word.
Is comparator a word? I think so.
Director
First I heard
Salzberg.
it, but I'm just curious, I don't know.
Who are our comparators? I mean, not all. Like,
The ones that we compared
Neighboring
ourselves with are Mounds View, 622 South Wash, White Bear, Forest Lake, Centennial, and Roseville.
okay, the nearby schools.
Yeah.
Oh, and how many elementary APs do we have?
One. It's a split position between Brookview and Lake Elmo.
Okay.
Other questions for? Otherwise, this does require board action. So is there a motion to approve the principal master contract? Dr. Probeni, second? All right, Director Lauer. All those in favor of approving the principal master agreement, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passed. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next up is our regular attendee, Paul Lee, Executive Director of Student Support Services, and sounds like first up is first reading of several policies.
Exactly. Good evening, board members and superintendent. Yes, so tonight we have 5 policies that we're bringing for a first reading to share with you. We'll kind of look at each one briefly, and then these will be brought back for a second reading probably at the next board meeting for consideration at that time, and input between those readings are welcome from anyone and the public. So the first policy is, this is a revised policy. It's a policy that we do have currently on the books, but there is a revision to it, and that's a recommendation from MSBA. It is a mandatory policy, one that we need to have as a district. The title is Search of Student Lockers, Desks, Personal Possessions, and Students' Person. The change is found in our current policy in item or section 3, and in the recommendation, as you can see there, that section 3 is going to be deleted from the policy and crossed off, and that's the only change with the policy. And this section directly addresses canine detection. And that's a process in which you could bring in a canine, and they sometimes call it canine sniff, to randomly walk about the building or the parking lot, smelling for anything that's not allowed within the school. We did have this reviewed by our secondary principal group and our SRO colleagues that work within our school, and they recommended that this be taken out of the policy. I believe the reason why MSBA is kind of recommending that this be removed and they don't include it in their model policy is that kind of under the Fourth Amendment, there's been some different legal challenges. It is allowed technically, but it does kind of put the district at a kind of undue risk, and it's not something that we do currently in the district. So it seems like the appropriate thing just to remove it from our policy. So that's the only change with that as a first reading. So if you have any questions with that, we can move on and certainly answer questions at any time. So the second policy, this is a brand new policy. The title is School Resource Officers, Policy 507.5. This is an MSBA model policy that came out in 2024, so just this spring. This policy, it does include some legal requirements that we as a district need to make sure that we're in compliance with. And it really lays out the contractual duties of school resource officers, and then some training that's required. And you probably recall back in the past legislative session, there was some legislation and statute around SROs in the buildings. And I know that the I'm not an expert in this, and Dr. Funk probably knows more than I do, but the community of the police forces and SROs came together with the legislature, and they found kind of a ground to make it safe for the police officers to be in the buildings, and they have their personal protections as it outlines in this training. So this is, I think, a very positive policy for us to consider adopting into our district. It was reviewed by Mark Dreberhausen, and with looking at our current contracts with SROs, and it's certainly consistent with those, so it wouldn't require any major changes. So we can move on to policy 514 and bullying prohibition policy. This is again a policy that we do have on the books. It's a mandatory policy. There were some kind of minor revisions added in 2024, and they're recommended by MSBA. Where they exist is in section 7 under training and education. There's some minor language changes and they state that consistent with its applicable policies and practices, the school district must, it used to say shall, must discuss this policy with students. The students is added. It used to just be school personnel and volunteers, but now it needs to be discussed, the policy with students, and provided the appropriate training for all school district personnel to identify and respond to prohibited conduct of the policy. And then it states that we must, it used to say shall, we must establish a training cycle for school personnel that is on a 3-year cycle. So it just clarifies some of the wording about shall to must, and it emphasizes making sure students understand the policies and the protections that are within the policies for them. The second component that has some minor changes in wording is in section 8, and that's on the notice. Basically, it adds language that we would need to post a summary, the policy in summary form within our administrative offices and school district offices. And then it clarifies that we also need to distribute the policy to our staff and independent contractors, and they clarify contractors who regularly interact with students. So again, just getting a little more specific, a little more specified on a couple of those components for that policy, which is a fairly robust policy if you read through it, and it's something that we have lots of procedures around regarding bullying in our schools. The next one is policy 530, immunization requirements. This does contain some legal requirements that we want to make sure we're in compliance with. We don't have a policy on our books for this. We have many procedures. It's in our health services handbook and things like that, but this puts it into policy for us. And so it just kind of lays out what the requirements are for students to have immunizations within the district, consistent with what is in statute. And so that is something you could take a look at and consider there. Again, was reviewed by our health supervisor, feels it recommends that this is a policy that we consider adding to our policies. The final for the first reading is a policy 535, service animals in schools. This would be a new policy for us. We don't currently have this policy in our books. This one originated in 2019. In this policy, and I think we're recommending that it be adopted, it kind of in the general statement of the policy states that individuals with disabilities shall be permitted to bring their service animal into school buildings or on school grounds in accordance with the subject to end of this policy. We do allow service animals in our buildings. That oftentimes comes across my desk. We had one last year. I'm not sure that we have one this year. I know we're going to have one next year as a service animal. But the policy is really nice for that purpose. It does fit with what we've provided for families when they're asking or requesting that their child bring a service animal, so it's very consistent with that. It defines what a service animal is, which is, a service animal is a dog, regardless of the breed or size, or a miniature horse. I always like to mention that just because I think it's kind of funny that you can have a miniature horse. We haven't had that, but so it lays out what does constitute a service animal, and what defines that, and the criteria in which that's permitted. And it's pretty clear. It's, one is that the service animal is required based on a disability that the person is presented with, and that they perform work or a task for that person. So it's very different than like a therapy dog or a comfort animal that you might see on an airplane. This is different. It's a technical service animal. So again, I think it's a good policy to have. There's a little bit you might want to be interested in a little bit on some liability. That the owner is responsible for any harm or injury that could happen, or property damage. So there's a little bit of that language in there too, just to clarify that for those families. So that concludes the first reading. The committee has reviewed these as well, and so these will be brought back. But if there's any general questions about those.
Yeah, maybe you answered this one. So the service animal, who determines that? And I was thinking like the emotional support animals that people on airlines complain about all the time. That's not going to happen in school, right?
Right. We don't allow that
All right.
in the schools. So it's determined by the school. There is kind of case law and statute that says we will look at it very broadly. So I think under OCR or anti-discrimination law, they want us to be more inclusive than exclusive. I'll just put it that way with that. But there isn't like a requirement, and it's true under OCR, like to have any kind of formal certification. But you do have to show that the individual has a disability and that there is a work or task that the animal performs for that person.
And would we be subject to legal challenges? Like if you say no, then it comes back at you, hey, you were not fair and you're...
Sure. I think you could be. And I know when we did have one case that was a little bit, we weren't quite sure, and we consulted with our attorney on it. And we did end up, having the dog come. And again, it was very successful for that student. So again, I think
This provides more prescriptive criteria for us, which makes it easier for us to defend ourselves if somebody challenges us.
Yeah, I would agree.
Then my other question was, back a few pages, the searches, where do cell phones come into that? If there's a battle going on between some kids in school, are you allowed to search their phones for bullying behavior or anything else?
We can ask somebody to open their cell phone. If they don't do it, and we suspect that there's something on that phone, we have reasonable cause, and if they say no, we can then turn it over to the police, because if they're telling us no, then it becomes, probable, and then the police can get involved, and then it becomes more of a legal issue. But we can ask kids to, if we suspect something on their phone, we can ask them to turn it on for us.
They may say yes, they may say no.
Right, and then that just elevates it,
All right.
depending on what the seriousness is of the allegation.
Other questions on the first readings? All right. Otherwise, I think you have several second readings.
We do. So we're going to return to 3 policies that we reviewed at a first reading at our last meeting. So the first policy for second reading is policy 420, students and employees with sexually transmitted infections and diseases and certain other communicable diseases and infectious conditions. I know at the first reading we talked through that a bit. This is a revision to a policy that we do have on the books with the updates that were discussed during the first reading. So I haven't heard any input, and the committee met before this and hadn't as as well. So that was one. The second one for a second reading is corporal punishment and prone restraint, policy 507. This is a new policy. It does contain legal requirements. And it just kind of lays out the definition and what's prohibited within that corporal punishment and prone restraint are prohibited within the district. So that's the second reading, no input, additional input from that one. And then the final one is policy 508, extended school year for certain students with individualized education programs. Again, a new policy recommended. I recommend that we have this in our policy. It's a legal it contains legal requirements and is certainly consistent with our current practices for our extended school year programming that we provide for students with disabilities. So very consistent with our practice. And no additional input that I'm aware of. So that concludes.
Perfect. Any questions on the second readings?
Can I just
Dr. Hockert, yeah.
try to connect some dots here? So for 507, which is the corporal punishment and prone restraint, that specifically ties to our own employees and agents of the district, but it excludes our resource officers.
Correct.
So then one of the new policies, this 507.5, would then cover our resource officers in the legal matters. Okay, so those two kind of work together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board? Otherwise, I'd like to open up for any public input on policies 420, 507, and 508. Say, seeing none, we'll move to take action. Is there a motion to approve the aforementioned three policies?
So moved.
Director Petrie with the motion, Dr. Perbeni with the second. All those in favor of approving policies 420, 507, and 508, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, policies passed.
Thank you.
Thank you for your continuing work on that. Otherwise, there's nothing for strategic direction D. So unless there is anything, I think meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.